Hello, this is Professor Henry, and welcome to the Crossing Ball. In this episode, we're going to be reviewing a couple snippets from a video by Peter Santinello. He's an American video maker and traveler and entrepreneur, and he follows along an individual named Titus. So here, we're going to be introduced to Titus Morris, who has been living in a remote part of the Appalachian Mountains for about 8 years with no electricity, mains, water, no cell phone, no car, even no shoes in the summer. He says he lives in a similar way to the Amish community, but he does not follow the religion and practices pure Christianity instead. Let's watch a little bit, kind of introduction to what kind of life he lives. Hold on one sec. Let's get this here.
I don't have any form of identification, no driver's license, no ID, nothing like that.
I have no clue what happened to Titus. He took off somewhere out there.
I wake up in the morning and there's a green hill on that side, and a green hill on that side, and I just have my own little peaceful valley here.
Amish friend.
We can accept and still go on with what we've got.
This is your whole dishwashing apparatus? I think that's the beauty. We can hang out today. We don't have to believe in exactly the same thing, and we can have an awesome time. This is your McDonald's drive-up window?
Yep. Hello.
Hello, Titus.
Hey.
You ever had a cell phone?
Never did.
Do you feel like you're missing out on anything right now? That's like childhood.
Okay, so that's Titus. We're going to watch a little bit about his religious views. As such, he's a very religious person. He's a Christian, and he talks a little bit about his faith. Obviously, he's not. He doesn't have any formal education in theology or anything like that. But his faith. That's why I'm titling this video "A Simple Faith" and an exploration of Titus's view on God and his relationship with God. I think it's really interesting because what it shows is that one doesn't need to have some sort of really complex, astute, rigorous theological perspective on God to defend one's faith. Kind of going back to Alvin Plantinga's warranted true belief. All one needs is a warrant, and his warrant for his belief is his own experience. And being that the experience is so powerful, it serves as a warrant for what he believes to be true. So let's listen a little bit to this clip. I really like this. Hold on one second.
Maybe there's a fine woman out there in the audience that wants to meet up with Titus one day.
I don't know.
How do people get in touch with you? Or you don't want to give all that information out?
You can put my phone and address on there if you want.
I'll not do all address, but I would do phone.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
All right.
But if somebody calls, I have to leave a message because it's a landline phone.
Sure.
And so I'm not there at the phone very much. I have my phone in a little shed by the house, and then I've got an Amish neighbor that helps me pay the bill, and we both use the phone.
Your Amish neighbor uses the phone?
Yes.
The same number?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, right here, we're going to hear a little bit about what his view on animals are. Then we'll get a little bit more into his religious views. But what he says is he learned a lot from being around animals. I really like his perspective. So let's listen to what he says about what he's learned from animals and what kind of wisdom he's gleaned from being around them.
So you just leave a message and I call you back. Yep. This is a Mennonite family.
So they have power?
They do, yes. Little fella mowing the lawn.
You know these guys?
Yeah.
There's one simple hearing hack anyone can use to improve their hearing almost overnight.
Oh. Oh. Oh.
Oh, beautiful. What do you learn from animals?
Well, I can answer that question with a story. So, when I got Great Heart back in like 2012, and so like he had never plowed before, and I was just learning to plow. So I wasn't good at it, the horses weren't good at it, and in order to plow you need to stay really straight, and one horse has to walk down in the furrow and the other horse has to walk up on the land.
Sure.
So as I was plowing, they were getting the horse that was I had stand fast down in the furrow. He kept on getting out and kept on like going crooked, and I was getting so frustrated and so angry, and I was trying to make him walk straight, but they wouldn't walk straight.
Okay.
And so I was all by myself, and so I started yelling and screaming at them and just like whipping them, just without mercy. And then I felt the Holy Spirit speaking to me and say, Titus, the way that if you were married, you would be treating your wife and children this way.
Oh.
And I said, oh, please forgive me, Father in heaven, please forgive me. And then I felt God telling me, Titus, you get out of line. You don't always walk the way that you're supposed to walk. How do you think that it makes me feel when you are not walking in the right path that you're supposed to walk in?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, wow, that's right. So I asked God, please forgive me. And then I went to my horses and I asked them to forgive me. So horses have taught me a lot of patience. You know, you can't expect them to always do exactly what you tell them to do because maybe they don't understand. They've not done it before. Maybe they don't understand exactly what you want them to do. So you learn to be patient. You learn to take your time to teach them. And then if you're willing to put that time and that patience in, then they're willing to just serve you with their whole heart.
When you
Okay, so, well, before we get into what he's going to say there, first of all, let's talk a little bit about his view on animals. He talks about what he learned from his horse specifically. He said since he owns a horse that he uses for transportation, plowing, and so forth, when he talks about the frustration he felt at the horse for not following his direction, God speaks to him about how he often gets off the path and goes the wrong way. But God does not treat him as such, so he shouldn't treat the animals in the same way. This seems to suggest that for Titus, animals reflect the scriptural view not of domination, but of responsibility. That just as God watches out for us, we should watch out for the animals he has entrusted us with. He expresses the view that animals teach him patience, that they don't always understand what you want to do, what they want you to do. You have to be patient with them. Now, this isn't a lesson that is obvious for one that has an animal as a pet. For Titus, he works with the animals. They get food from him, and he gets food as well, but they aren't pets. They are not even just companions, but they are partners in nature, in the natural world. When we are in the modern world, technologically advanced world, we often seek wisdom from animals. We do so in an inappropriate relationship of expecting companionship rather than partnership. It's much different, and the respect is much less authentic. So when you're partnering with an animal or some sort of creature, it's much different than when they're a pet or when they're just someone that happens to be there to span time with. It's a connection with something transcendent, something more than you or the animal, more than what the animal wants or even needs. But there's something that both of you need at the same time that you must look toward, and that's the natural world. So it's not just a pet relationship. It's not even a companionship as much as a partnership. Let's hear a little bit about what Titus has to say about his views on talking with God. This is actually pretty interesting. So Let's hear what he has to say here.
You say God, you get a message from God. Walk me through that. What does that you mean? You actually hear something, it just naturally happens through your body. What do you mean by that?
Well, like when I was saying I felt God speaking to me or the Holy Spirit speaking to me, I didn't hear like an audible voice, but it's this very strong thought in my mind.
Okay.
That I know that it's not just my own thought. Because naturally in that situation I was heated up and I was angry, and all my thoughts were just frustration of how I couldn't get this job done.
Yeah.
And then there's this calm thought that comes from God reasoning with me, saying, Titus, you're being unreasonable with your horses. You need to take a step back.
So well, I know the answer already, but spirituality is super important for your life, right?
Definitely.
Like you wouldn't be able to do this without it?
I wouldn't be at peace. Like I would be afraid. I would be afraid that some natural disaster is going to come and a drought's going to come, or some country's going to attack, or those things could happen. But I'm at peace now, knowing that I have a Father in heaven that cares about me, and that He's going to provide what I need.
So what's going on in society? You're not really tuning into it at all, or are you?
I hear people talk about
Well, we won't go into his views on politics. Which he's not as interested in that as he is in his immediate world of experience. But this is where Titus expresses his view on talking with God. He states that he doesn't hear God audibly, but he hears God in his mind. He feels a strong idea, a strong thought, a strong message, and he claims, since it is so strong, it is against his own will. For instance, when he was angry at the time, not wanting to reason. So when you're angry, you're not wanting to reason or appeal to reason. You just want to appeal to that visceral response. And this reason for him must be God. Now, this, I think, is probably the most telling aspect of this simple but profound theology. For the simple theology of Titus suggests that the reality of God is expressed not through evidence in the natural sort, but through experience and relationship. One could argue that these are evidence, but nonetheless, these are warrant for his belief. The atheist may suggest that this may very well be just in his mind, for a schizophrenic, for instance, has a strong sense of an otherness or a thought that is too strong and against their own will to be their own. Likewise, the dissociative personality that creates personalities would also seem to dictate against this. And yet this assumes that these other personalities are A, just in the mind, and B, a part of the individual themselves. However, it's quite possible that these multiple personalities are not the individual themselves, but rather an influence from some other individual. If thoughts would merely emerge from the brain, then the multiple personalities would have to come from the brain and thus the individual. However, again, there are reasons to believe that consciousness does not emerge from the brain, such as the categorical distinction of matter from the mental, as well as qualities, as well as all qualities. As well, there is reason to believe that the consciousness is not identical with specific neurological algorithmic systems and relationships given representational drift, to where memories, thoughts, etc. do not map onto these specific identical neural relationships, but is more like patterns that influence brain states, which is what is observed. So with this in mind, I think this is a rational and sufficient reason to believe in God, given he speaks to the individual as a separate will imposed upon a person. Indeed, reason itself, which is what Kant recognized as a deontic imposition upon the individual, could be seen as God's will, which would be the warrant for God's existence for a person in their lives. This could even extend to the gospel itself, for inherent in the story of Christ giving his life for us, the examples of love, examples of faith, even the miracles, while not evidence historically that these things happened, though there is historical evidence that Jesus existed, died by crucifixion, and it was resurrected, is also warrant for their belief as a myth or a story, which maps onto the deontic rationale for living in love, in humility, with faith, and so forth. For instance, when someone comes to Christ, one is not compelled by a rational argument as much as the immediate connection with the story, with the narrative. And given that the narrative's so strong and powerful, it overcomes one's will, it overcomes one's ability to reason and give rational reasons, because reason itself emerges from the story. One could argue that just because one comes up with a story that maps onto our desires for peace, it doesn't mean it is true. But this reminds me of the quote from George MacDonald when Little Diamond is challenged about suggesting his friend Nanny's dream is true. She says, "It is too good to be true." He then states in response to her that it is impossible for something to be too good to be true, since the good is true. And if the true is true, and if something is too good to be true, then it cannot exceed truth, since the good is true and the true is good. The concept of something as too good to be true is comparable to saying a circle has four sides. It sounds a lot like an ontological argument. However, I am of the opinion that metaphysical possibilities that are logically impossible not to be true can inform us about something being ontologically true. And so the compelling nature of the story of Christ, just the narrative itself, not taking into account the historical aspects and trying to rigorously argue against the critic or the skeptic who finds it extraordinary to believe such a thing, particularly for someone not capable of evaluating historical claims as well, can recognize that a story is true, even if there is no physical evidence. Ultimately, on some level, the story of Christ is true. How we cannot say whether Christ lived in an empirically verifiable history or in some ethereal transcendental history or foundation of events, that Jesus is not true given the name for the protagonist of the story of the gospel we call Jesus is what we call Jesus, and is our best understanding the foundation of the Logos, his incarnation in the cosmos, as related to the foundation for the Holy Spirit, which is the action of the words of the will that we experience, is God and is based on Christianity. In short, the story of Christ is so overwhelmingly compelling when one hears it and one is open and one is in a particular state of longing. For instance, in the words of Francis Thompson, when he says, "When so sad canst thou sit or cry, and upon thy so sore loss shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder, pitched betwixt heaven and Charing Cross," it does seem that some narratives are so powerful that they rip open that barrier between this world and the next, and we see, for once in our lives, the truth. So furthermore, what is funny is that the atheist calls, I think this is kind of interesting. When an atheist calls himself a naturalist, and this is going back to Titus's, the way he lives his life, here Titus, who actually is closest to nature than any of these computer-addicted, neck-bearded keyboard warriors, he's the true naturalist. It's kind of interesting. So, in conclusion, Titus's simple faith needn't have a thorough justification in a complex string of arguments. It can have a simple warrant that is compelling enough for Titus to choose to believe in his experience and what he has been taught about his faith. And just a little comment on experience for anyone who might be a critic and say, well, what if someone says they experienced Santa Claus, or what if someone says they experienced a faun or a fairy? Those sorts of experiences are visual experiences, right? These are like cryptozoological experiences. I thought I saw Bigfoot. I thought I saw this. This is different. When one encounters Christ, one encounters an overwhelming personality that seeps in to the very heart of one's being. This is much different than a cryptozoological creature, or maybe a folk tale about a leprechaun or something like that with particular dimensions. God himself is far beyond any type of dimensional measurement. Particularly the story of Jesus, when told, when experienced, is far, far more powerful than any simple narrative. So, one can have a simple warrant that is compelling enough. And for Titus, he chose to believe in his experience and what he has been taught about his faith. So, thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.